I think so. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Parks, Recreation, and Leisure Activities Committee meeting. April 3rd, year 2025, 12 p.m., Charlottetown City Hall, Council Chambers. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Order of business. Item 2, declarations of conflict of interest. Is there any conflicts of interest? No? Okay. Approval of agenda? Move. Second. Motion carried. Adoption of the minutes, March 3rd, 2025.
I'll move it.
Move. Second. Is there any business arising from the minutes? No? Thank you. Okay. We have 4 reports, and then we have to go into a closed-door session. I want to remind everyone I was approached by a member of the committee today, and we have committee members that have other commitments, so I hope to get through the agenda as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our manager, Frank Quinn, to take us through the reports, starting with A, resolution to open up the Victoria Park active transportation pathway earlier this season. Frank?
All right, thank you, Chair Tweel. So you'll see the reports in your package there. It's pretty straightforward. This is something we've been able to do the last number of years because our weather has been changing. It tends to snow goes quicker, which is always good. And then it allows us to get our active transportation pathway open sooner. Because this is in the Victoria Park bylaw, that it can only be opened earlier if council approves it. That's just why I have to bring it through this committee and then on to council. What we are looking at doing, the Victoria Park bylaw, promenade bylaw, is going to be updated here this year. So we'll be incorporating into the bylaw that the boardwalk, or the AT pathway could open earlier. We'd put in April 1st if weather permits. So I don't have to bring this back to the committee every single time. As you'll see down below, I had mentioned that 4 of the last 5 years we've been able to open it earlier. So anyway, so if committee supports that, it'll get the AT pathway open a little earlier. April 9th, I believe, is what I'm proposing. And then it would stay open until the end of October.
Thank you, Frank. I think it's a great idea to open it up earlier. I did have a discussion with our senior management in the last couple of weeks. I noticed a lot of young families are gravitating towards the playground, the playground that's in Victoria Park, the one that was constructed by Canadian Tire, and young families are walking on the inside lane like it was closed off, and that puts everyone in a precarious situation, especially the vehicle traffic. They're not expecting to see young families walking on that lane. So as you know, we closed or opened it up for an active transportation pathway during the summer months. So I would personally like to see staff, weather permitting, make that call. And if we can change that bylaw, I think that's what required, Frank, then we don't have to keep coming back, as you said. So I want to thank you for writing up the report. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councilor Matar.
Yeah, I think we've been dealing with it for quite a few years, and I mean, it makes sense. If you can integrate it in the new bylaw, it's a good idea, because like I say, we've been doing this for the last 5 years, so.
Okay. Motion carried.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Our next, okay. Just have to,
Artificial turf.
yeah, I know, I just want to bring it up on my agenda here. Okay, the next item is our artificial turf. As you know, senior management in the Parks and Recreation Department was mandated to do an internal review on some of the sites. I believe that process has been completed, and we're here today to hear the recommendation from senior management Frank, is it you or Christopher? Yourself, okay, thank you. Take it away.
Shut their mics off. There we go. All right. Thank you, Councillor Tweel. So you'll see this report in your package, and like you had mentioned, Councillor Tweel, staff was asked to go back and review all the artificial turf field location options, and then recommend a site back to the committee, and then bring back to council for their final approval. So the purpose of this report was as we went through the assessment report that was completed back in 2017. We also added 3 additional sites to the site that reviewed as well. And this all sort of started for this, the sort of report details indicates, you know, the privateers came in and did a presentation, and then we had our capital budget discussions following that, and the turf field, a multi-sport turf field got put on our capital budget list. Then it was brought to council, and there was at the time, one of the councillors mentioned, you know, to remove the word Simmons and revisit all sites. So that's what we ended up doing. We revisited and looked at all these sites that had been put forward in that assessment report. And then also 3 other sites were brought to our attention, so we reviewed those as well. And what this included was us going through going through and actually looking at all the sites that were proposed, reviewing them, and updating information because there was some changes to the sites, and then also evaluating other locations that were not originally in that original report. So in the report, you'll see that the minimal dimensions required to construct a multi-sport artificial turf field, including the buffer zone, is recommended to, and the buffer zone is recommended to be 4.5 meters or 5 yards to meet the needs of all identified sports, which is soccer, football, lacrosse, field hockey, rugby, ultimate frisbee, and cricket. Would be a minimal of 146 meters long and 73 meters wide. And so I'll have you just refer to the actual, the Charlottetown Multi-Sport Field Location Review Table, and that will provide a lot of details of all the sites we reviewed. And ultimately at the end of it, and once you get to the end of it, you'll see that staff reviewed and evaluated all the locations noted in the Charlottetown Artificial Turf Field Assessment Report, along with evaluating 3 new locations. Staff updated the information within the attached table to reflect the current site-specific considerations for each location option. Staff have determined that the most suitable location to construct a multi-sport artificial turf field would be the Simmons Sports Center field, the Simmons Sports Field, located based on the following considerations. And those were, it's a city-owned land, it has a required footprint, the project scope only requires the turf field to be constructed, necessary amenities within Simmons Sports Center, i.e. change room, washrooms, community room, there's sufficient parking, it's centrally located, it's an accessible location, flexibility for future site expansion, it's adjacent to 2 large schools, and a lighting glare assessment completed with minimal impact on surrounding properties. And you can see that in the assessment report, and we can go through that if you would like. So yeah, and just the biggest, ultimate at the end of the day, the financial implications, the money is approved in the city's budget, and once we get the sort of direction and approval from council, we would be moving forward with this project ASAP, going out and getting an RFP to award the design drawings and whatnot. So if you would like, I could go through all the attached sites that were looked at and just more or less mention them, but ultimately at the end of the day, Simmons was by far the top site and meets all the requirements of being able to construct a turf field on that site.
Thank you, Frank. I want to thank the staff for going back once again to do that internal reassessment of all the sites. I think a credit to your department for exploring this exercise once again from a very methodical, number of different perspectives, logistically, location, the site being a walkable site for a lot of our community groups and participants. More importantly, I think the new Simmons Arena plays a indispensable role in offering different attributes. You know, certainly, if you look at all the amenities that the new facility provides, dressing rooms, parking, community access, the community room, I think it's a great fit, personally, but I've felt that way all along, to be honest with everyone. I do want to congratulate you on going through the exercise once again, and I think it's important to note that this exercise was completed by 2 engineering consultants, and they weren't the same consultants, I understand. 2 different consultants, so they come through with the exercise. Our senior management team and the Parks and Recreation Department have done their due diligence time and time again. So having said that, I'd like to open up the floor. Councilor Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and good work from staff. The only thing I'll say is there was nothing wrong. It came from the floor that we should look at all avenues and just see if there's any better options. And I think that was a good idea. And this shows that Simmons is the best option. But at least everything else was reviewed, as opposed to building a field and have people ask questions later. Well, why didn't you build it here? Or why didn't you build it there? All the answers are here now, and we have a site recommendation. So, and I think everybody will be happy with it. So I'll move if it needs to be
Thank
moved.
you. I'd just like to make a comment first. So again, I'd like to say thank you to the park staff. I think based on our meeting that we had at council was to go back and have this second sober look at the report that was done in 2017 to validate whether or not those recommendations were still valid. And certainly going through the city-owned lands and the non-city-owned lands is proving to be Simmons, based on the recommendation here, Simmons to be the most adequate place for that. A question just in regard to non-city-owned lands. There's a number of things that are listed there, and it's easy to just list places that we visually see. Has there been ever any stakeholder engagements? For instance, Charlottetown Event Ground, just be an example. Maybe they're not interested in selling that property for that purpose. Like, I know a lot of this would require land acquisitions or trading of land, maybe at Stone Park, and there's other locations that are, visually look like they may be a fit for a thing. But ultimately, you've broken that down here on the pros and cons as to why some of these locations are not. But what's really not added here in those other locations is probably the sheer cost of acquiring some of this land in these other areas, or whether or not there's even an appetite by that entity to even entertain the sale or trade or something along those lines. So I think, looking at the perspective of city-owned, city-operated, city land, Simmons places us in that best position as well. We don't have a land acquisition to occur there. And the other areas that are listed on city land don't seem to be adequate enough to house that. And then when you move down into the other areas, you're starting to get into land acquisition. And again, that there's a willing partner in that. So I think it's important to note that those costs, could be substantial to the budget as well. So our budget was based on city-owned land and providing this service to citizens of Charlottetown. So thank you for the work. I think it's addressed the request that was asked upon to look at other areas, factor in the pros and cons, costs, et cetera, and we've landed on Simmons as being the most adequate spot for that. So I guess who am I to argue that there's a better place based on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Tartan. You'll second the motion?
Yep. To move
Okay.
forward.
So the motion's on the floor. Councilor Beck requested to be here today and gave him assurance he would have an opportunity to be a full participant. Go ahead, sir.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak as the Ward 3 representative, counselor who represents Ward 3, the area in which Simmons is located. I just want to go back to, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I'll direct the questions through to Frank and Christopher, if that's okay. All right. So I want to go back to the motion that was made, and I was the counselor who made the friendly amendment, and my request was two parts. One was to remove Simmons as the name, and the second part was to consult with external parties to see what potential agreements were possible to be explored. So the inference made here today, and Councillor Twill, you alluded to that this was an internal review, when that was not the request to review the internal document. It was a request to consult with potential external parties. My concern was primarily around not opposition to the project. I've never stated opposition to the project. Mine was around potential arrangements that could be looked at to reduce the cost on the $3.4 million that we allocated towards this. So that was the original request when I made the amendment, and that's what council agreed upon that night, was when we voted 8-2 to support that amendment. So I do have a few questions, and the first question would be, it kind of tags on to what Councillor Martard had raised, and the first question would be, what consultation has been done with external stakeholders? And I'm referring in particular here to the provincial government, CADC, Holland College, and UPEI, who I would see as potential partners in this, and what consultation has been done to look at potential partnerships with them? Maybe Frank or Christopher, if you could answer that.
All right, Councillor Beck. So I have spoke with a couple of individuals from Holland College, from the province, just having sort of preliminary discussions, and part of it was because they had reached out to ourselves or to the city to actually have their location considered. So I have spoke with them. I think ultimately the reason why we reviewed the assessment report and the locations is we wanted to identify what was the most suitable location by far, and sort of which was the top location that would work, that would be the easiest to move forward with a project, that you'd ultimately, at the end of the day, you would only have to construct a turf field. All of the other locations had some deficiencies that would have to be addressed. So that would ultimately put the cost of the project up. Now, if we partner with a group that is going to, the city would not fully own that field, so we would not have complete control of how the field is being operated. And I think the department strongly feels at this point the city needs an artificial turf field that we 100% manage and control, so that we can meet the needs of all the community groups, we can meet the needs of schools that are adjacent to the fields, and it doesn't mean down the road that the city couldn't become a partner with another organization, whether it's the province, could be Stone Park, could be Holland College, it could be UPI. But right now we felt that the need was that the city need to own and operate an artificial turf field that we have 100% control. All the other sites, for the most part, had some limitations or needed additional infrastructures that would put the budget up. So you balance that as well, and it would also take a lot more time once you go out to a third party. Are they interested? What's the conditions before you even start construction? You'd have to have a memorandum of understanding in place, and then you'd have to have a formal agreement in place. So hope that answered your question, Councillor Beck.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just touch on that for a minute. Why the insistence, because I've heard this repeatedly mentioned from you, from Councillor Twill, from Privateers Football Club, that the club has to be 100% city-owned, 100% city-operated. Because with that comes 100% costs, 100% responsibility for maintenance, 100% responsibility for repairs and upgrades. So why is the committee and the staff insisting that the city be wholly owned, built, and operated? If you could answer that.
I just want to say a couple of things to that, Frank, and then I'll turn it over to you. The community user group, particularly the privateers, made that abundantly clear at the presentation that was made back several weeks ago. The consensus is our community groups would have a much better experience. We'd have predictability. We would have that consistency and that continuity in terms of field bookings. We wouldn't have to worry about field deficiencies, as our manager pointed out. This would truly be a multi-purpose sports field that would accommodate all the sports, like football, for example, which has specific dimensions. You know, if you look at some of the other sites, and I said it that night you moved the amendment, University doesn't have proper field dimensions for football and other sports. The venues that they constructed were built for specific sports. So we want, in Parks and Recreation, to be all-inclusive, diversified, and to provide, I'm sorry. Before I get to, did you want to say something, sir? Take the mic.
That's not allowed. You can't take questions from the gallery during a meeting.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Twill.
That's Paul Trowan, representing the Privateers football team, who's been very active in this entire exercise with the Privateers. Go ahead, Frank.
So, Chair Twill through to Councillor Beck. So the reason why we've been adamant of having it as a city-owned and operated field is because we 100% then will control how this field is operated. We will control what user groups are on there. We can control what revenue needs to be charged. We can also then manage the actual expense budget. So I see this field as actually being cost neutral, that we will generate enough revenue to actually cost the maintenance or cover the maintenance costs. And also as well that we could create a sinking fund, take a portion of the revenue we collect and put that into a pot that when the field the turf needs to be replaced back in 15 years or so, we would have a large sum of money there to be able to do that. We do have arrangements where we use school fields, and they're not formal arrangements; they're just sort of verbal arrangements. They can change. We don't always have access to the fields we'd like to. They're not always in the condition we'd like them to be. So if we are managing it ourselves, then we are responsible for making sure the field is maintained properly. It also helps to ensure if we 100% own the field as well, then we're making sure the necessary maintenance is being done so that the turf will last as long as it can. You have to do regular maintenance to a turf field to ensure that the turf stands up and to ensure that it's safe. So it just gives us a lot more control, and the city has grown to the point where we have a high number of community user groups that need access to a field, and we can't accommodate them right now on our current sport fields that we have, our natural grass fields. There's just more users than there is actually fields. And so this would be, and we have done the, down the road where we did partner with UPI back a number of years ago when the original turf field was built. And that worked well at the time where our demands were at, but our demands for access to turf field has increased dramatically since then.
Okay, just on that note, the sinking fund, the expenses, the revenue, all those could all those arrangements not be accommodated in a memorandum of understanding with an external partner?
So yes, you could have, but whoever owns the field will oftentimes set that rate. And even you put a memorandum of understanding, there's always room for play, but it's easier, straightforward. We feel that you actually could keep your rate at a more reasonable rate because there's no actual markups in that area. We'd say, okay, here's what it's going to cost us to manage this field. Here's what it's going to, we need to set for sinking fund. And we always keep in mind too that we are trying to, get as many community groups on the field, make it as affordable as possible. So, if the city decided they wanted to subsidize it a bit to allow for that to happen, then we'd have that control as well. So it just, memorandum of understandings, yes, you put it in place and, you can put a lot of things in place there, but you can't have everything, especially when you don't ultimately own the actual property that you're building the field on.
Yeah, a lot of good information was said here tonight. I'm just going to tell you from my experience. So one, some of the non-owned properties that we do have agreements with, and we are responsible, Councilor Beck, for 100% of the repairs anyway on those fields. It's part of the agreements of us using them. We cut the grass, we have to repair it, keep it in decent shape. Whether it's a school or whether some of these other properties, they get to use them, but we look after them. UPEI, and Frank mentioned that the arrangement we had a number of years ago, to me, ended up being a disaster. We did supposedly had a sinking fund. When it came time to replace the turf, there was no sinking fund. It was used for general revenue. So there's been some issues. We've had MOUs. There's been some issues with them, that particular project for sure. So for me, for this field, spending $3.5 million, I think it's best to have it on city property, and then the city looks after the rentals and the revenues coming in and so on. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to the user groups for a minute. Throughout this process, we've pretty much only heard from one group, that being privateers. It's been mentioned that it's a multi-use sport. The emails that we've received one, I think, from a Javelin Athletics PEI or something like that, Javelin. But apart from that, it's been pretty much correspondence that has come from Privateers Football Club. So my question is what consultations were done? I mean, this is a report from 2017. And what consultations have we done with other user groups? And what is their current stance on the construction of the field?
I couldn't actually speak exactly on what all these groups would have, their stance on the field. I know we have communicate with the other user groups regularly, and they have indicated that they want a turf field in the city to help accommodate, the needs. Some of these groups would maybe.
I'm asking about Simmons. This is coming forth, a recommendation for Simmons. I mean, I'm not talking about a field in general. I'm talking about Simmons.
Yeah, so I was just going to get to that. So, Councillor Beck. So what do we be looking at? A number of these groups that mentioned, they'd like them maybe in their area. So whether that's an apartment location or Winslow location, or maybe it could be another location. But Simmons location has been discussed previously, has been mentioned to them. And the groups have indicated, of course, if there's a turf field, they will come to it. And when we went through the locations, looking at locations, Simmons was by far the top location on all the areas that I mentioned, and would have the scope of work would just include the construction of a turf field. We wouldn't have to deal with additional parking. We wouldn't have to deal with dressing rooms. We wouldn't have to deal with other amenities that would have to put on the site. The site as well is set back in a way that there's a roads on both sides of it. So light illumination or light glare would not impact the residents like it could potentially in some of the other locations. So we didn't the conversations have been sort of informal when we spoke to different groups. We have received emails from La Crosse. I believe Christopher could indicate we probably received emails from the school as well, I believe. The school as well, and they do support that location. These soccer groups, I can't recall if we received actually formal emails, but I know I have had conversations with a couple of the individuals in the clubs, and they are supportive of a turf field, and Simmons does make sense. They indicated as well, but some of these groups too would like, of course, have a turf field in their area as well. The biggest thing is we're trying to design a field that actually meets the needs of all sports. So there's a multi-sport field. So because we're doing that, the field has to be larger, and some of those other sites creates more challenges to actually put a field in those locations.
Could you provide some letters, can you provide some information on that, if you do have the letters of support that came from various groups, so that we are aware? Because right now, we've only received information on one, so if you could provide any information for council later on, that would be appreciated, if that's okay.
Sure, we'll do that, Councillor.
And that would be
Councillor.
stuff that you would have received to date.
Councilor Bernard?
Thank you. And I just want to say, I'm not sure where this is going, but for me, when I voted for this, this was for a multi-purpose field. This is for multiple sports that we've said we were behind on for so long, whether it's soccer, whether it's rugby, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's box lacrosse. So I don't want the focus to be this is on one sport. This field we're building is for multiple sports, and we as you know, Norman, we've been behind in a lot of our sport infrastructure. So one of the reasons like I say, I was excited about it is because it'll help an awful lot of sports by getting more field time. And obviously, with more field time, you're able to get more games played, but we can play later into the evenings, depending on the time of year with the lights on. So it kind of sounded like we were focusing on one sport. It's multiple sport.
I know,
And it helps
yep.
a lot of multiple.
And that's what I want. And again, I'll reiterate, I'm not opposed to the project.
No.
I'm not opposed to the project. And we have, in Simmons right now, we have a very usable field that we've invested a lot of money in, underground sprinkler system, irrigation system. It's used by a lot of community groups right now. And on that note, if we take that field effectively out of commission and turf it, we are reducing our capacity, not enhancing our capacity. So if we were to have another field in a different location, we can still keep Simmons. We can still use Simmons and have the turf field in a different location. Still, that's enhancing our capacity.
Yeah, but I think that was the idea. I think we agreed to look at all other areas of possibilities. But I kept coming back to Simmons, which to me makes sense because you have your parking, you have your washrooms, you have the change rooms, you have everything there. And I think that's why we agreed, let's look and see if we're not missing anything here. There may be another good option, but there hasn't been. This is the best option.
But again, I think that's going back to the original motion, Councillor Bernard, was to engage with other possibilities in external agreements that could be struck. And from what I'm hearing here today, it was only a preliminary conversation with Holland College and a preliminary conversation with the province. There was no discussion with CADC or no discussion with UPEI. So I'm going back to the original spirit of why we are where we are today. And so, again, it's not about the project itself. I'm trying to enhance our capacity and try and make this done in a financially responsible manner. And I'm just going back on that point. I just want to go back to the infrastructure piece, just as an example. If we were to look at some of the costs associated with the new field, we could be potentially looking at savings in over $1 million. And factor in inflationary costs, probably somewhere in the vicinity of $1.3 million. So,
But we had that with UPEI years ago. We put a lot of money into that turf field.
Yeah.
And we're not-
then
we're
get a
not-
better
and they-
MOU.
We did an MOU, and we did what's a good MOU.
No, get a better MOU.
Well, we thought we did because we had the carry facility before that.
And plus,
It seems like the board out there overrules it, but I'm not going to get into the whole UPI thing. I just think that, for me, I've learned that on city property is city controlled.
exactly. Thank you, Councilor Bernard. And, I'll come back to the practice times. Comparing the artificial field turf to what's there today is night and day. It's night and day. That location with the directional lighting, coaches, be able to hold practices in the fall of the year after 5 o'clock. Has to shut down. You can't use the field. So we're really not maximizing the potential of what that site has to offer. And, this has been made quite clear. That's the probably one of the indispensable attributes to a project of this magnitude, is that it's truly multi-purpose. It's operational more hours of the day. There's more longevity when it comes to the fall of the year and in the spring of the year. One of the catalysts, I mean, there's no secret, the privateers have been very active, garnering community support. They have a lot of community support. Make no mistake about it, folks. They have a tremendous amount of support in this community. People that are not even into sports are saying, that's the location. What's the issue? So we want to maximize the potential of what a field turf has to offer with the latest in technology of synthetic fiber. And, the staff did their due diligence based on recommendations from 2 consulting engineers' report. I mean, they've looked at it a number of times. Nobody knows the user groups better than our senior staff. They deal with them on a daily basis. They're taking the phone calls. They're taking the emails. They're open-minded. They're open-minded. They always have been. Might not agree, but they have an open-minded, and they do talk to our community groups and entertain presentations regardless of what the sport is. We've done that over the last year. We've met with a lot of different sporting organizations, and sometimes it's not the proper fit or they look elsewhere. But I want to remind everyone in this chamber that we're the capital city. And right now, we're way behind when it comes to having our own synthetic fiber field turf. Look at Cornwall and the success they've had. They've got 2 of them. And they've already gone through replacing theirs and met with huge success. A lot of our sporting organizations are going out to Cornwall. Why? Because it's a great facility. Stratford, they're knocking on the door, wanting to build their own facilities, and people are excited about that. But we're the capital city. So, we've got our senior staff, they're making the recommendations, they've outlined and illustrated the deficiencies of all the other sites. So, having said that, Mr. Quinn.
Do I have a question there?
So Councillor Tweel and through to Councillor Back. So ultimately, at the end of the day, if we had another piece of property that was not developed as a sport field that was suitable for a turf field, we would consider it. As you can see in our list there, we don't necessarily have those pieces of property unless they are non-city owned, which we did look at those as well. Simmons, with regards to building on that site, yes, we're taking away a field that would have in the range of 300 hours of use a year, and we're gaining actually 4 to 5 fields on top of that, because we're going to be able to put 1,500 to 2,000 hours a year on a field because it's a turf field. So we'll be able to, middle of April, when we have groups that want to get on a field, it's hard to believe, but they want to get on a field, we'll have no issues with opening the field early. And then into the fall, when there's the seasons go into late in October, the weather changes and we have to close the fields, we'll be able to keep the turf field open till the snow flies, which will end up being probably close to the end of November. We also will be able to not have to necessarily monitor the use as closely, like on a natural grass field, where we only allow so much use per week. So if there's a tournament on the field over a weekend, we'll rest the field the next week. And we have to do that. And we also have to take time throughout the season and rest the field. So grass fields do tend to be more challenging to maintain, because you do have to monitor use and you have to keep in mind what type of weather you have. So a turf field would enable us to actually be able to accommodate users that we would take 5 to 6 fields to accommodate at this site, having a turf field.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess what I'm weighing, I'm going back and forth and I'm, thinking about the premise here of city-owned, city-operated, city-controlled. When I look at the non-government areas, there really is, and then from a cost-saving perspective, aside from UPI, all the other entities, we'd have to enter into some form of partnership with that entity, who would then have to essentially donate the land to make it cost neutral for what we have now. We already have city-owned land with Simmons. We would expect somewhere else to be given free land for cost neutral. Otherwise, we're increasing the cost. If they come in at a partnership where they were donating money towards it to help for the capital cost of it, of course, that would be a reduction. But I'm not sure there's many of these entities that are sitting out there wanting to donate hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars towards a city-owned, operated turf field. They would want their interest involved in that as well. So that leads us to UPI, which is the entity where would make sense, like you say, if it was only about cost savings, because there's already infrastructure in place, but then that negates the whole, it belongs to the city, operated by the city, controlled by the city, and the city calls it its very own turf field. And then, of course, you get into conflicts with many user groups that are already using the McAdam Field at UPI. So that's why I feel like, there's already activity happening there. There's already going to continue to be activity happening there. And I think introducing a city agenda over on top of that is not going to work in that environment. Because we obviously clearly have an agenda here that we are trying to work towards with our own city-owned turf field. And we can control the programming, as you said, the user groups, expand upon user groups, expanding the use of it through various other sports, multi-sport, which we probably can't do at UPI. We wouldn't have that kind of leverage to do that. Regardless of the cost savings there, it is still going to be solely owned and operated by UPI as we as a major partner under some agreement that we've already had in previous years that is not going to enhance that footprint. I don't see that as being enhancing that footprint. We can still continue to partner with UPI with other programs. That there's no reason for us not to continue that relationship going further and even expand more on our sporting. But I think the premise of what we're trying to do here is to, like I say, is to find a location that best suits, checks off all those boxes, allows the city to invest in the future of sports, for youth sports and activities, multi-sport for that matter. I'm not saying football, multi-sport across the board for years and years to come. And, to the tune of our $3.4 million, which is a huge investment. I'm not denying that that's not a huge investment. But from a long-term perspective, you talked about 15 years longevity possibly for a turf field. That's a nice investment for 15 years worth of for turf field. So I don't see how we can go down this road. Yes, there are other locations that could suit in the non-city owned, but we're not just going to get that without a cost associated with that, and without other terms and conditions attached to that as an entity who wants to see a return on their investment. So that's why I support. I think the work that has been done here to date. Like I said, Simmons, it seems to check off all the boxes financially, location, the agenda of what we're trying to do here at the city, and that's why I support Simmons' recommendation now that it's come back to this thing, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity for you to look at the other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Tart.
I have a few more questions, if that's okay. Well, I have a few more, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to lose my quorum, so, go ahead.
Okay. I guess I want to go back to a couple of things. Simmons is going to be used, it's been previously stated that Simmons will be used for a longer season. That had been previously stated at other meetings before. We're going to have a longer season with turf field, if a turf field goes at Simmons. I'm questioning whether we have the ability to, it was indicated here that there's sufficient parking, change rooms and all that. If we're going to have Simmons going longer and we're going to have a field going there longer, and we're going to have multiple events going on in that area, be it at the field or at the rink, and we're recommending change rooms being used at Simmons. I don't see how they can be accommodated, and I'm concerned about the amount of ability to accommodate parking, to accommodate all the people that are going to be there at that one time in a congested area like that. Could you speak to how that could be accommodated, Frank?
Frank, before you do, please. Well, I'll take a shot at it. We will have access to the two parking lots at Colonel Gray High School. We have the student parking lot, and we have the teachers' parking lot, which 9 times out of 10, it's not really utilized.
It's not our land.
No, it doesn't matter, but still.
It does matter. It's not our land.
But I mean, but they can park there, whether it's our land or not. And furthermore,
Well, what if
they
there's
also-
event- what if
let me
there's
finish,
events going
Norman.
on?
Let me finish. Plus, they have access to parking at Spring Park Church. Some of the participants have parked their vehicles there as well. There doesn't seem to be an issue. I mean, we've got a sea of parking all around this venue. So I'm sure we can get the cooperation, and we'll have the cooperation of Colonel Gray High School, the church. I mean, if you want to look at it, Holy Redeemer's got a big parking lot, so there's all kinds of parking and opportunities and options around that facility. So, I mean, that's what we talked about previously as well. And it's a great opportunity to work with these different, these different venues. Frank?
To that question, has there been any arrangements? We're talking about going on. It's not our land. It's provincial land. It's a private church.
I know.
2 churches that we're saying go freely park.
So, Chair Twill and Councillor Pack, so we've had no discussions with other organizations yet with regards to parking, because we believe right now that there's sufficient parking on this site, unless there is big events and tournaments and whatnot, and then we would reach out. Right now, the school actually sometimes uses Simmons parking lot, so I know that they've used the Simmons parking lot, and we allow that to happen. Queen Charlotte uses it for their parking as well and drop-off, so we have a good relationship with the province in that area because of the 2 schools that we've worked closely with for many years. The schools are going to benefit greatly from having this turf field here, so I'm sure they'll be open to allow parking if we have big events. But we will be working with regards to events taking place at the Simmons Sports Centre, at the turf field, to ensure we don't have 2 large events going at the same time. When the rink does open in the fall, some use will be dying down at the field, so there might not be as, bigger tournaments and stuff, like it'll end up being groups that go later in, could be evening use, those kind of things. So it's, until we get there, but I feel that there is sufficient parking. It is 185 parking spots, almost 200 in the Simmons parking lot. You do have the other areas around there. So I've been there, and unless there's large tournaments, the parking lot is not full at Simmons. So unless there's large events and stuff. Now, having said that, the facility is substantially higher used than our other Simmons because of the walking track and because of the community center. So it all depends on what types of events we have going on. But we'd look after that through scheduling as well to make sure we're not booking too much in all the facilities at the same time.
Because it was previously stated that the goal of using the facility was to extend it into April, extend it into October, November, when the weather gets colder, and to do that. So there is going to be increased usage of the facility in conjunction with an extended season at North River Road, which leads me to my next question. Has there been any consultation done with residents in the immediate area regards their wishes or potential community impact?
So I guess once we have the approval of council on the location, then we'd be working on getting a design company to do up a design. We would have public consultation at that time to get their input into this design, any issues or concerns, and we would try to, take those into consideration like we did with Simmons. There was a lot of items brought forward from the community. And if they made sense, we worked them into the actual design of the new Simmons building. So that's part of the public consultation. Until we know what we're going to be doing that, and we actually are going to be doing at the location, it's very difficult to go out and, do public consultation. We don't know what we're actually going to be actually building at the site and that we have permission to build at the site. So that's sort of where we're at. But once we have permission to, this is a chosen site, we go out and get our design done, concept design, our sort of space review, go out to the public, get their input, do the final design and tender documents, and then go out to tender and incorporate any feedback we receive from the community.
But that's after it's a done deal.
The location would only be the done deal, the design.
The feedback from residents would be done once the location is, and design are chosen, not beforehand.
Yeah, unless there was major pushback from the community saying, okay, yeah, this has been this kind of thing, then we'd bring this back to council, which we've done before. If they said, okay, we're going to do this here, but we're received all this feedback from the public, okay, let's reconsider. Maybe we need to, redesign the facility. Maybe we need to relocate it to another location. So yeah, but you sort of have to have something to bring to the community to know what it's going to look like and know all the actual impacts of designing a turf field at this site will be.
Okay, one last question, if it's okay. So we did receive, I want to go to the report. There were a couple of things that were adjusted in your updated report that UPI was originally indicated as being adequate in size. Now it's not, or it's indicated as a moderate concern. The lighting was indicated as only partially installed at UPI, but that will be fully lit based on the contribution that we're making to the city. And so I think those should be reflected in the report as being changed or will be changed because those are coming, those are forthcoming. The other thing is I'm wondering about, I want to go to the events ground as a potential site, and I didn't know that the events ground was even mentioned as a site before until we received the information from Sandy McDonald, the president of Holland College, who was not in support of Simmons and would actually like to see it down there. And I came to learn that there had been a lot of discussions with the Wade McLaughlin government. And
Point of order.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm asking the question, Councilor.
No,
No,
and
just
I have a
go
point,
ahead.
I have a point of order.
yeah,
Okay, and these committees that we set up are recommending bodies.
yeah.
Okay, a lot of the questions he's asking are questions that would be asked on the floor during council. So
But I'm bound by time constraints of 5 minutes at a council meeting to speak. And this is an opportunity where we have professional staff. A lot of the work is done to ask clarifying questions at the committee level. That's the purpose of committees.
yeah,
is to
the
ask-
committees make a recommendation to move ahead to council with this. That would be your question to ask at council. I mean, we don't have all day to ask questions. that would be asked
I'm
at
wrapping up, Councilor Bernard.
council. Okay.
Yeah, I have one question. So there were schematic renderings that were done at the events ground that came from, I don't know who. And I know that there was a lot of interest in doing actually some clubhouse stuff, some stadium seating, I believe. And I know there was 2 sites. I don't think one of them would be recommended at all. But in the report, or the updated report that you provided there, Frank, it said that it was, yeah, there you go, soil conditions, stormwater management challenges, flood zone, land acquisitions. Where did that recommendation come from, and who made that determination, or what is that based on? Because it sounds to me like there was a lot of discussions that were had between Holland College and the provincial government about that site, and then now, and I do know that there's an interest in Holland College to partner with the city on building a site. So why was that indicated as a red on the report, and how was that determination arrived at?
So Councillor Beck, so I wasn't privy to discussions that CADC or Holland College or the province had on those locations. The site was mentioned that, this was a site that was possibly being considered. So just knowing the history of the events ground, it is a site that was remediated and made into an events ground. So there is some soil contamination in that area. That's been something that concerns. Also, when we look at the site to do a north and south orientation, it will affect potentially, and any orientation would affect the actual events ground, what it could be used. So a turf field, you couldn't actually have an open event on it without having some type of covering over it, because, if you had an open concert or whatnot on it, it would actually potentially damage the turf field, people drinking beverages or whatnot. So that would be, and then also, and it just could be challenged. And when you do a north-south orientation, it is being pushed out, it's being pushed back into the parking lot. So we know there's soil conditions that would have to be assessed there to see actually what the conditions are like. That would be some challenges that could potentially be created. And then the other location we had just looked at, it was a property to the north that we couldn't even see being recommended at all. We did look at the McAdam Field at GPI. That was one of the top contenders, and we did look at that site. And I know Christopher just brought up a map there to sort of show. So when we actually try to fit all the needs of all the user groups to make an actually multi-sport field, the field would go out over the actual running track. So they would have to remove the running track. Yes, there is some infrastructure there for underground lighting now. The other lighting is not there right now, so I didn't put that in. I could put in that, that is occurring here in the near future. I don't know the timeline of when the lighting's happening. So there would then potentially be, and then also the field is not a north-south orientation. If we're investing a large amount of money, we feel it makes strong sense to actually have the proper orientation of a north-south.
Okay, that wraps up the discussion on the recommendation from senior management to the committee. All in favor? Motion carried. I want to thank you, Councillor Beck, for coming here, and
you.
I said I would give you the opportunity. I think
you. I
I fulfilled
appreciate
my commitment.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Sorry.
Councillor or Chair Tweal, and Councillor Beck, if you have any further questions and want to line up a meeting, I'm more than open to line up a meeting and go through things in more detail, so feel free to reach out if you'd like. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we've had discussions before, Frank, and I know that I've shared some of we had this discussion prior to a few weeks ago. So I think I guess my final point is I still think that there's opportunities for engagement with external stakeholders that has not taken place that I would still like to be taking place, but the motion is moving forward as is, and we'll discuss it. I assume it's coming Tuesday night, is it?
That's
Or
the
comes
plan.
to your Regular council, okay?
That's the plan. Okay. Our next report is Seniors Engagement Committee minutes. Is there any discussions, gentlemen? No? Everything's okay? Youth Engagement Committee meeting that's D? Any concerns or any questions? No? Okay. Motion to move into a closed-door session as per section 119.1, the Municipal Government Act of Prince Edward Island. P, information received in confidence, which, if disclosed, would likely be prejudicial to the municipality or parties involved. E, a matter of still under consideration or which the council has not yet publicly announced a decision, and which decision in public would likely prejudice the municipality's ability to carry out the negotiations. A, land swap. B, land use requested. Do I have a motion?
Moved. Second.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we're in closed-door session.
Moved.
Okay, just 1 second.
Well, I don't mean to calm down. I mean, Norman's a great guy.
We're live there.
I just thought, I don't know if he really knows, but that,
It's on open right now.
Motion for adjournment?
moved.
Second?
Second? Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I mean, Norman's fairly new at it.